You are creating a disturbance and putting this flight at risk. Do you understand me?
Oh, this behavior is completely unacceptable. We will not tolerate it.
When a flight attendant humiliated two sisters, she had no idea what was coming. What happens when arrogance meets karma at 35,000 feet? This flight attendant was about to learn the hardest lesson of her career. Marcus Sterling had mastered the art of invisibility. Despite owning a fortune that could buy private jets 10 times over, he preferred walking through airports like any other traveler. Today, he wore a simple leather jacket, comfortable jeans, and worn sneakers, the kind of outfit that made him blend seamlessly into crowds. Beside him walked his greatest treasures, his twin daughters, Riley and Reagan. At 16, the girls were inseparable. Riley with her nose always buried in political biographies. Reagan with her sketch pad constantly capturing the world around her. They were heading to Paris, a trip Marcus had planned for months as both education and adventure. What none of them knew was that this ordinary Tuesday morning would become anything but ordinary. As they approached Gate 23 at JFK International Airport, a woman in a crisp Navy uniform stood watching. Diana Mitchell had been a flight attendant for Skyward Airlines for 18 years. She prided herself on maintaining standards in first class, standards that, unfortunately, had more to do with appearances than actual airline policy. When she saw Marcus and the twins approaching with their boarding passes, her perfectly plucked eyebrows rose skeptically. The girls wore matching hoodies with anime characters splashed across them, and their backpacks looked like they belonged in a high school hallway, not a first-class cabin. "Excuse me," Diana's voice cut through the air as they reached her station. "These are first-class tickets?" Marcus handed them over with his characteristic calm smile. "Yes, that's correct." Diana studied the passes as if they might be forgeries, her lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the girls, then back at Marcus, her expression broadcasting her doubts louder than words ever could. "Proceed," she finally said, though her tone suggested she was doing them an enormous favor. The Sterling family entered the aircraft and found their spacious seats. Riley immediately began comparing the entertainment options with Reagan, their excited chatter filling the cabin. Marcus watched them with quiet joy, grateful to see them so happy, but Diana wasn't finished watching them. As passengers settled in, Diana made her rounds through first class. She smiled warmly at the businessman in 2A, laughed politely at a joke from the elderly couple in 3C, and offered extra champagne to the woman in designer sunglasses in 4B. When she reached the Sterlings in row 5, her demeanor shifted like clouds covering the sun. "Excuse me, sir," she said, hovering over Marcus. "I need to verify your tickets once more." Marcus looked up from his magazine. "Is there a problem?" "Just following protocol," Diana replied, though her eyes told a different story. Riley and Reagan exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was the third time since boarding that Diana had questioned their presence. Marcus handed over the boarding passes again. Diana examined them with theatrical thoroughness, as if expecting invisible ink to reveal their fraudulence. Other passengers began noticing the commotion. "Everything appears in order," Diana finally admitted, returning the passes with obvious reluctance. But 15 minutes later, she was back. "Sir, I'm going to need to see identification for your daughters. Minors traveling internationally require additional verification." Riley's face flushed. Reagan's hand gripped her sister's tightly. Marcus remained calm, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He produced their passports. Diana took her time examining every page, every stamp, every detail. A male flight attendant named Carlos approached, sensing the tension. "Diana, is everything all right here?" "Just being thorough," Diana responded curtly. "We had an incident months ago with passengers who didn't belong in first class. I won't let it happen again." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Carlos shot Marcus an apologetic look before gently pulling Diana aside. "They have valid tickets. You've checked 3 times. Maybe it's time to let them enjoy their flight?" Diana's response was just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "They don't look like they belong here. I know the type of people who can afford first class, and this isn't it." That's when something shifted in Marcus's expression. Not anger, but a quiet resolve. What Diana didn't know, what she couldn't have known because Marcus had deliberately kept his profile low, was that she wasn't just insulting any passenger. Marcus Sterling was one of 3 principal owners of Skyward Airlines. He had built the company from a regional carrier into an international powerhouse over 20 years. Unlike many executives who plastered their faces on magazine covers, Marcus preferred anonymity. He wanted to see how his airline really operated, how his employees truly treated passengers when they thought no one important was watching. And now he was watching very carefully. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, another flight attendant named Sophie approached the family. She was young, warm, and genuinely kind. "Can I get you anything?" she asked with a real smile. "We have some amazing desserts today." "That would be wonderful," Marcus replied, watching as Sophie engaged his daughters in friendly conversation about Paris, asking about their plans, recommending hidden gems in the city. The contrast between Sophie's treatment and Diana's couldn't have been starker. Riley leaned toward her father and whispered, "Why is she being so mean to us, Dad?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "Sometimes people make judgments based on how you look rather than who you are. It's wrong, but it happens. How we respond to it defines us more than their actions define them." Reagan wasn't satisfied. "But doesn't it make you angry?" "It does," Marcus admitted quietly, "but I'm more interested in making sure this doesn't happen to other families who don't have the resources to fight back." Hours passed. The cabin lights dimmed for the overnight flight. Most passengers dozed off, but Diana seemed determined to hover near the Sterling family, watching them like a security guard monitoring potential shoplifters. Finally, as breakfast service began and Paris drew closer, Diana made one final approach. "I trust your flight was satisfactory?" she asked Marcus, her tone suggesting she hoped it wasn't. "It was educational," Marcus replied cryptically. Diana's smile faltered slightly, unsure how to interpret that response. As the plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from his wife Olivia, asking about the flight. He typed back, "We landed safely. I have some business to handle with the airline when we return. I'll explain later." The family disembarked, and Diana stood at the exit offering robotic goodbyes to departing passengers. Sophie was beside her, her farewell to the Sterling family genuine and warm. "Enjoy Paris," Sophie called out. "I hope you create amazing memories." Riley and Reagan waved back enthusiastically. Diana barely nodded. What Diana didn't see was Marcus stopping at the Skyward Airlines customer service desk before leaving the airport. What she didn't hear was him quietly providing his executive identification to the desk manager and filing a formal complaint, complete with flight number, seat assignments, and detailed descriptions of repeated discriminatory behavior. The desk manager's eyes widened as she realized who was speaking to her. "Mr. Sterling," she stammered. I had no idea you were on that flight. This will be handled immediately. I am so sorry." "Don't apologize to me," Marcus said firmly. "Apologize by making sure this never happens to any family again. I want a full review of Miss Mitchell's conduct, and I want mandatory training implemented for all staff. Today." For the next week, Marcus immersed himself in being a father. They explored the Louvre, where Reagan stood transfixed before the Impressionist paintings. They climbed the Eiffel Tower, where Riley delivered impromptu history lessons about its construction. They ate croissants at sidewalk cafes and got delightfully lost in Montmartre's winding streets. But in the evenings after the girls were asleep, Marcus reviewed emails from Skyward's executive team. The investigation had moved swiftly. Diana Mitchell's employment file revealed this wasn't her first complaint, just the first one serious enough to warrant executive attention. Previous passengers had mentioned her judging behavior, but nothing had been formally documented with the detail Marcus provided. Christopher Blake, Skyward's head of human resources, scheduled an emergency meeting upon Diana's return to New York. The subject line of his email was simply, "Required attendance. Conduct review." Diana had no idea what was coming. Diana entered Conference Room B at Skyward Airlines headquarters with confidence bordering on arrogance. She assumed this was about some minor complaint. Maybe the Sterling family had whined about her diligence. She was prepared to defend her actions as maintaining standards. Christopher Blake sat at the head of the table, flanked by Diana's direct supervisor, Patricia Torres, and another executive Diana didn't recognize. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming," Christopher began formally. "We need to discuss your conduct on Flight 447 to Paris last week." Diana waved her hand dismissively. "If this is about those passengers in row 5, I was simply following protocol. They didn't present as typical first-class travelers, and I had every right to verify. You had no right, Patricia interrupted sharply, to verify their tickets 3 separate times after they'd been approved at the gate. Diana bristled. I was protecting the integrity of our first-class service. Christopher slid a document across the table. This is a formal complaint filed against you. The passenger described repeated harassment, discriminatory behavior, and humiliation of his minor children based solely on their appearance. I did no such thing, Diana protested. I treated them exactly as I would any passenger who seemed out of place. Out of place, Christopher repeated slowly. Can you elaborate on what made them seem out of place? Diana shifted uncomfortably. They were dressed casually, the girls were loud. They just didn't have the demeanor I've come to expect from our premium passengers. I see. Christopher exchanged glances with Patricia. Ms. Mitchell, do you know who filed this complaint? Some entitled passenger, I assume, who didn't like being asked to follow rules. Christopher's expression hardened. The passenger who filed this complaint is Marcus Sterling. Silence. Diana's face went blank. Marcus Sterling? Yes, one of the 3 principal owners of this airline. The man who signs your paychecks. The executive who has spent 20 years building this company on principles of respect, dignity, and equal treatment for every passenger, regardless of their appearance or perceived socioeconomic status. The color drained from Diana's face as if someone had pulled a plug. He owns... She couldn't finish the sentence. He does, Patricia confirmed, and he deliberately keeps a low profile when he travels specifically to observe how our staff behaves when they think no one important is watching. Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. You showed him exactly who you are. Diana's hands trembled. I didn't know. If I had known, that's precisely the problem, Christopher cut her off. You would have treated him differently if you'd known his position. But every passenger deserves the same respect. Whether they're a CEO or a college student, whether they're wearing designer suits or hoodies, whether they fit your personal image of what premium looks like. The meeting continued for another agonizing hour. Diana learned that other passengers had reported her behavior over the years, subtle discrimination that had been noted but never seriously addressed until now. Christopher delivered the verdict. Diana would receive a formal written warning that would remain in her permanent file. She would be required to complete 40 hours of diversity and sensitivity training. She would be placed on probation for 6 months, during which any additional complaints would result in immediate termination, and she would personally write letters of apology to Marcus Sterling and his daughters. This is your only chance, Patricia said firmly. Mr. Sterling could have demanded your immediate termination. Instead, he's giving you an opportunity to learn and grow. I suggest you don't waste it. Diana left the building in a daze. Her 18-year career hanging by a thread, her pride shattered. 2 weeks later, Marcus sat in his home office in Manhattan when an envelope arrived via certified mail. Inside were 3 handwritten letters, one addressed to him and one each to Riley and Reagan. Diana's letter to Marcus was raw and honest. Mr. Sterling, there are no words adequate to express my shame and regret for how I treated you and your daughters. I have spent 2 weeks in training, forced to confront biases I didn't even realize I carried. I convinced myself I was maintaining standards when in reality, I was enforcing prejudice. I judged your family based on superficial appearances, their age, their clothing, their demeanor, and in doing so, I violated every principle your airline stands for. I made them feel unwelcome in a space they had every right to occupy. For that, I am profoundly sorry. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I am committed to change. Not because my job depends on it, though it does, but because I finally understand the harm I've caused, not just to your family, but potentially to countless passengers over the years, who I made feel less than because they didn't meet my arbitrary standards. Thank you for not ending my career, though you had every right to do so. I will spend the rest of it trying to become the kind of flight attendant who makes everyone feel valued. Sincerely, Diana Mitchell. The letters to Riley and Reagan were shorter but equally sincere, acknowledging the hurt she'd caused and praising their grace under pressure. Marcus called his daughters into his office and showed them the letters. "What do you think?" he asked. "Genuine or just covering herself?" Riley read hers twice. I think, I think she means it." You can feel the embarrassment in the words. Reagan nodded slowly. "She hurt us, but maybe she needed to be hurt a little too, to understand what she was doing." Marcus looked at his daughters with immense pride. "You're both wiser than you know. Everyone deserves a chance to grow, even people who hurt us. That's what separates us from them." 6 months later, Marcus had to fly to Tokyo for business. As always, he booked first class under his own name, with no special notation of his position. As he boarded, he noticed a familiar face at the front of the cabin. Diana Mitchell. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, panic flashed across her face. The last person she wanted to serve was the man whose career she'd nearly sabotaged. But Marcus simply nodded politely and made his way to his seat. Throughout the flight, Marcus observed Diana carefully. She treated every passenger with warmth and genuine attentiveness. The businessman, the young couple on their honeymoon, the elderly woman traveling alone. There were no judgments, no subtle discrimination, no assumptions based on appearance. When she reached Marcus's row, her voice was professional but carried an undercurrent of nervousness. "Mr. Sterling, can I get you anything?" "Club soda with lime, please, Miss Mitchell." She returned moments later with his drink, and as she set it down, she spoke quietly. "Sir, I just want you to know, I think about that flight every single day. Your daughters deserve so much better. I'm trying to be better." Marcus looked up at her, seeing genuine transformation in her eyes. "We all make mistakes, Miss Mitchell. What matters is what we do with them. Keep learning, keep growing. That's all any of us can do." Diana's eyes glistened briefly. "Thank you, sir, for the second chance." As she walked away, Marcus felt something unexpected. Hope. When Marcus returned home, Olivia asked about the trip. "I ran into Diana Mitchell," he said. "She was our flight attendant." "The same woman who—" "The same one. But Olivia, she's changed. Really changed. I watched her treat every passenger like they mattered, regardless of who they were." Olivia smiled. "Maybe that's the real success story here. Not punishing someone out of a job, but helping them become better." Riley and Reagan, overhearing from the living room, came to join the conversation. "So people can actually change?" Riley asked, always the skeptic. "Some can," Marcus replied, "when they're given the right motivation and the right support." Diana could have responded to discipline with resentment. Instead, she responded with genuine self-reflection. "That's rare." Reagan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm glad you didn't get her fired, Dad. I mean, what she did hurt us. But if she's treating other families better now, maybe something good came from something bad." Marcus pulled both girls close. "That's the most mature thing I've heard all week. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't about punishment. They're about transformation." 3 years later, Diana Mitchell stood in the training room at Skyward Airlines headquarters, facing a class of new flight attendants on their first day. She'd been asked to give a presentation on customer service excellence, an honor she never imagined she'd receive after nearly losing her career. "I want to tell you a story," Diana began, "about the worst mistake I ever made in 18 years of flying." She shared everything: her prejudice, her assumptions, the humiliation of learning she discriminated against the airline's owner, and most importantly, the painful journey of confronting her own biases. "Every passenger who boards your plane is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's loved one," Diana concluded. "They all paid for their ticket. They all deserve your respect. Don't make them prove they belong. Assume they do, because they absolutely do." The new attendants listened with rapt attention. Some looked shaken, realizing how easily they might fall into similar patterns. "The man I wronged gave me something precious," Diana continued. "He gave me the chance to be better. I try every day to honor that gift by treating every single person who enters my cabin like they're the most important person on that plane, because to someone, they are." After the presentation, Diana returned to her locker to prepare for her afternoon flight. Inside was a handwritten note from Christopher Blake. "Diana, outstanding presentation. Mr. Sterling specifically requested you for this training role. He believes in second chances and in your ability to help others avoid your mistakes. Keep proving him right. CB. Diana smiled, tucked the note carefully into her bag, and headed to her gate. On that flight, in seat 12C, sat a young mother traveling alone with twin toddlers, looking overwhelmed and anxious. Her clothes were rumpled from travel, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her carry-on bag stuffed with diapers and snacks. Old Diana would have judged her, perhaps questioned whether she could afford first class, wondered if she'd disturb other passengers. New Diana saw a mother who deserved support. "Welcome aboard," Diana said warmly. "Traveling with twins. You're my hero. Let me help you get settled, and I'll bring some extra pillows. Would the babies like some apple juice?" The mother's eyes filled with relieved tears. "Thank you so much. I was so worried I'd be in the way." "You're not in the way," Diana assured her firmly. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." And she meant every word. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about revenge. They're about redemption. Sometimes the greatest act of leadership isn't punishment. It's providing the opportunity for growth. And sometimes the most important lesson we can learn is that we all carry biases we haven't examined, prejudices we haven't confronted, and assumptions we haven't questioned. Marcus Sterling could have destroyed Diana Mitchell's career with a single email. Instead, he chose to create an opportunity for transformation, not just for her, but for every passenger she would serve in the years to come. Riley and Reagan Sterling learned that true strength isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes it's about standing firm in your dignity while allowing others the grace to change. And then Diana Mitchell learned the hardest lesson of all, that the person you dismiss as not belonging might be exactly the person who determines your future. She also learned that second chances are precious, rare gifts, and that the greatest way to honor them is to become someone worthy of them. The next time you're on a plane, look around. That casually dressed passenger in the hoodie might be a tech billionaire. That anxious young mother might be a surgeon heading to save lives. That quiet teenager sketching in a notebook might be the next great artist. Or they might be none of those things. And it shouldn't matter. Because everyone deserves respect. Everyone has dignity. Everyone belongs. No matter what they're wearing, where they're sitting, or what assumptions we make about their story. The question isn't whether they belong. The question is, are we worthy of the privilege of serving them? Diana Mitchell learned that lesson at 35,000 feet in the most humbling way possible. She'll never forget it, and neither should we. What did you think of this story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination based on appearance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story made you think differently about assumptions and second chances, hit that subscribe button. We have more stories that will challenge the way you see the world.